Making a video game by yourself is very stupid. Producing a video series about making a video game by yourself is completely insane. What do you mean error message?
What's this now?
Out of memory.
That's some bad news.
Huh? There's nothing but fuck-ups and errors to fix all the time.
What did we learn? I don't know. I'm trying to find out. Today we're going to talk about something pretty fun, kind of boring.
Alright, so this is my first development vlog for a game I'm making, and I am completely new to game making. I've only been doing this for a couple months now, and I'm making this video series just because I really like video editing, and it'll give me something to do other than making pixel art and going through lines of code. And B, you know, maybe there's some other beginner game makers out there that would get some entertainment out of this and might even learn something. I'm not a total novice. About 10 years ago, I got the crazy idea to begin making games. I watched several tutorials back then. One was about it's like a simple game. Ooh, I might still have that file. I think they're in here somewhere. Yeah, so I did a game where you have a ball and the ball rolls around and collects coins. Again, I didn't make this game, I just followed a tutorial video. And so yeah, you know, when I first started, I started with the absolute most basic of basic tutorials. Alright, here is my ball game that I made 10 years ago. There is a ball, and we can see there's a maze to go through, and you collect the little coins, I think. So yeah, I believe you can just add 3D objects, and you can make spheres and cubes, and I think it's just those, and then you can just change the color of them and add, like, rigid bodies are the things that kind of control physics with it. So, and colliders and rigid body combined kind of create this object that can't fall through the ground, and if it collides with other objects, things can happen. And again, this is very basic. There's also just 3 scripts, it looks like, and super simple movement scripts, very short. And so yeah, you know, if you're new, completely new to Unity, this could be a good starting point. This was my starting point. Let's see, does the game still run 10 years later? Yeah, I don't know about this view. Oh, there it is. Oh, fucking A, I missed it. Okay, so, you know, there it is. And you can collect all the little guys. And if you run into a wall, oh, yeah, it's not exactly the best crash physics. You don't really bounce off the wall. Pretty game, but that was the first thing I made. Beyond that, I seem to recall, let's see what, Ragdoll Survival, that was, I wonder if that one's still there. A bit of a shooting game tutorial, and that does not seem to exist anymore. That's kind of sad. It was kind of sweet. I'm gonna pull that one up too. Let's just happen if I try to play it. No. All right. It was pretty cool. It was like a point and click. You were like a kid with a little toy AK-47, and he had a little nightie on, and he was sleepwalking, and then all his toys were coming to life and attacking him, and you were like shooting him. And that was another free tutorial that Unity offered 10 plus years ago. The problem with these that I realized is somebody somewhere created these 3D meshes and animations for these characters, like all these environments, like this little, you know, Legos and shit over there. And I didn't know how to do that, and I was like, well, I could learn how to do that. Or maybe a 2D game would be easier to do animations for, because it's just, you know, it's just images. I can make an image with Microsoft Paint or something, you know. So here was my first pixel art. You know, I was like, hey, I could use Microsoft Paint. I can make shitty looking little pixel art things. He's not great. I think I made it. This guy looks kind of cool. All right, that one took a little more effort. I like this guy. Old guy with a bomber jacket and a kukri, ready to kick some ass. I think I wanted to make some kind of stealth game But I did make some sprites, and I did animate them, and I was satisfied. It actually looked pretty cool. This guy looks kind of awesome. Something else I did do, I tampered around with the idea of like an animation, a pixel art animation that could do sort of cinematic scenes, potentially tell a plot of a game. This is how far I got. So here's a scene of a wounded soldier coming across a Tibetan temple. I'm not entirely... I think that was going to be my protagonist, was going to be this soldier kind of turned monk or something like that. And so now we can kind of see that the animation is breaking down. I had different layers, and each layer was kind of animated separately, and then I had a camera zooming out, a little script that controlled a camera zooming out, and it would also control the layer's motion to kind of create a pretty cool effect. And I was pleased with this. This was pretty simple, but I was like, okay, I can kind of make something like this work with Unity, which is cool. But you know, it was a lot of work, and I wasn't really sure what kind of game I wanted to make. I didn't really have a plan. I was also working on my PhD at the time. Kind of really before I got very much into it, I almost gave up on it before I really started. You know, I learned how to code in C#, which is necessary for Unity, from the tutorials. I made a few of these, but I never really fully dedicated myself to it. And now I have some time on my hands, and I'm trying to play less video games, and I thought, well, I've always dreamed of making my own game. Why not kind of pick up where I left off? You know, the time I would normally spend on video games, if I just dedicated that to making video games, making the artwork and all that kind of stuff, I bet I could actually make one. Will I make a compelling one? Will I make one that sells well? That's kind of not the point. I just want to be able to say I made one, and if I like it, maybe I'll try to make more. So that, you know, then the question arose of what kind of game should I try to make. Obviously it has to be 2D. There's all kinds of 2D games out there, but I just thought if I'm going pure simple 2D game, the simplest has got to be a 2D platformer. I mean, there are a lot of old games, but one of the most old and kind of popular games of all time is like old school Mario, you know, a game where somebody kind of hops around. So that's what I set out to do, and I got a little platformer and a little guy that can hop around. And then I've been, okay, well, what kind of setting do I want this to be, and what kind of story do I want to tell? What kind of character, who should this little guy hopping around be? I decided the setting I wanted was just one of my favorite settings of any video games. I just like the aesthetic of it, which is cyberpunk. I fell in love with cyberpunk before I even knew the word cyberpunk. A video game, Final Fantasy VII. Again, it depicts this kind of technologically advanced city that's pillaging the world of natural resources, and then also there's this slum underneath the city that is just like the moral decay, and the look of it is just amazing. And so, you know, me in whatever, the 4th grade or 5th grade, I was playing Final Fantasy VII. You know, I loved cyberpunk before I'd ever seen Blade Runner or any of those things. So, okay, I want to do a cyberpunk setting. My original idea for a protagonist was not the one that we see here, this little robot monk. I'll tell you about him later. My first idea was inspired by Love, Death, and Robots. There's an episode called Good Hunting, where there are these mythical creatures that can kind of shapeshift. I don't know, they're like fox-like creatures, and our protagonist's father hunts them down and I think kills one of them, but then our protagonist, a young boy, befriends the other one. The two friends get separated, and the guy moves to a city, and there's this like cool steampunk aesthetic to the city, and there's all this industrialization, and there's like kind of like colonialization kind of going on to whatever this fictitious Asian country is. The guy goes to work and kind of learns how to become a engineer in this sort of steampunk society, and the gal, who's actually this weird fox demon creature, ends up, I think, becoming like a prostitute, but is like tortured and comes to him for help, and he designs her a robot body so that she can run around and jump around the concrete jungle of the steampunk world. And I think she goes and enacts her revenge against all these asshole dudes that are like torturing prostitutes. And I thought that was pretty fucking cool.
Good hunting, Yen.
So yeah, I was going to pretty much just like straight up copy this story, but translate it into a cyberpunk setting. So some kind of ancient entity or being. I was thinking some kind of like forest spirit, like a dryad or like a forest elf or something like that. And was kind of lost to time, and the world had completely decayed. All of those sort of natural ecosystems had died off and replaced by this sort of dystopian cyberpunk world. Some engineer somehow finds this forest entity and decides he wants to help her or it with cybernetic enhancements. And so I actually did draw a picture, and I didn't really like how it came out, of a cybernetically enhanced dryad kind of looking thing. And I was going to make a 2D platformer with this as the main character. I think I kind of had an overarching plot that, you know, she was going to enact revenge on the city-dwelling world. I decided I didn't really like the character much, even though I had sketched her out, and I was kind of thinking, well, maybe I could go back to the drawing board and think of another plot or another character. I was pretty inebriated, and I was thinking, one of my favorite things, there's a cyberpunk game called Cyberpunk 2077.
Good morning, Night City!
Very popular, I'm sure a lot of people know it. And in that game, there are these monks that kind of hang out. And I like the look of them, I like the feel of them. A lot of them have like removed their cybernetic implants, and they're like swearing off modern existence. And I was like, man, that's cool. Maybe my protagonist could be like a Buddhist monk in a cyberpunk world. I'm not sure exactly what he's doing or why he's fighting. Usually Buddhist monks are non-violent. I wasn't sure. I didn't really have a plot, and then I was like, well, it'd be really cool if he was like a cyborg monk and like had like a samurai sword and was like cybernetic parts and had like cool shit. And so I was looking at pictures that other people have made of like cyborg monks. There wasn't really a lot. It also doesn't make sense for a monk to be a cyborg, because you would think, you know, a monk is very peaceful. Why would he like modify his body to be a cyborg? And as I was looking at cyborg monk pictures and not really liking this idea, I came across a robot who was like a Buddhist monk robot, like Zendaya. No, not Zendaya. Is Zenyatta in Overwatch is kind of this like Buddhist monk robot. And I was like, ooh, that's kind of cool. I kind of think, and that ended up being the character I drew. I was pretty bombed out, and I had these ideas, and I sketched out a character, and I was like, this guy's pretty cool looking. And then I made him into a little pixel art, and I was like, I like this guy. This is who I want to run around. Is this guy? He's fun. And so then I was like, well, shit, what is this guy's story? Why is there a robot that's a monk? In a cyberpunk world, nobody's making a robot to become a monk. Like, nobody gives a shit. They just want to make money. Robot monks do not make money. So how does a robot become a monk in a cyberpunk world? At the time, I was watching a show called Murderbot about a security robot. So basically a robot that's sort of military grade, designed to fight and do security and riot control and these kinds of things. Who kind of malfunctions and becomes kind of free of the code that makes him obey orders, and he gains his own agency, and he has to decide what to do with his life, and he kind of befriends these hippies, and they kind of teach him about humanity.
It calls itself Murderbot. House private. It's a killing machine.
Murderbot?
Can you stop calling it Murderbot? It's terrifying.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what it calls itself, so I am just being respectful.
And it's a very interesting show. You should watch it. It's great. Alexander Skarsgård is wonderful in it. And so that was sort of sticking in my mind as like, what if there was a robot who was like a security unit, a military robot. Somehow they kind of malfunctioned. He was kind of an empty slate. And what if, kind of going back to that old idea, what if he kind of wandered out of the city and there is a lone monk out there living on the outskirts of the city. The robot learns from the monk and kind of becomes a Buddhist monk robot, and then is kind of confronted. He has kind of this consciousness for the first time. He becomes conscious and aware of the universe and his place in it, and of society, but within the context of Zen Buddhism, which is something I'm very passionate about, but still has all of these sort of security robot character. He's a badass, basically. I haven't completely fleshed out the rest of the plot of the game, but I kind of see him as, he's kind of gained this freedom and this agency and this consciousness, but the rest of the security robots, the military robots of the world have not, and he wants to go kind of free them and let them find their own path as well. So that's kind of, I think that's a lot of plot for a 2D platformer. But I like that. I like that you can be creative with games.
Why are you even watching this show?
Alright, so I did kind of draw up an animation, and I didn't really like how it looked, and I was kind of new to pixel art. I used a program called Graphic Scale. So this is Graphic Scale, which is what I had started using. It's basically just Microsoft Paint, but with layers, and so you can layer on, say, clouds, and here's some streets, and here's my city, dumpy looking kind of cyberpunk city. There's some little cars, hills. There's my this is a monk overlooking the city. This is our monk that is going to discover the robot, the malfunction robot. And then I have some hologram and a ballerina. And so you can set up these layers to make these pixel arts, and then you can separate layers. Like this is just the city layer, and you can change certain things in the layer to create an animation. So in Unity, coming over here, we can see that I have all of these different layers to it. So I can toggle the monk layer, but then I can also animate this monk layer. So if I zoom in on my monk here, and I have created in graphic scale a few different monks where there's just a slight change between each one. And again, there's tutorials for doing all this stuff. I'm not really doing that. I'm just kind of giving you some creative ideas. We can see him breathing there. And so if I hit play, we can kind of see the monk is slowly breathing in, bringing it out, in, etc., etc. And that just kind of replays on loop. And you can do this for every layer here. So I don't just have a monk, I have the whole city has its own animation. The moon, the clouds, everything else. The clouds, I actually put a script on, the cloud move script here. We can see it's a very simple script, and basically what I'm doing here is giving it a move position, and so we're taking its existing position and we're adding a little bit as time goes on to its position, so that's just slowly going to shift it one direction. That's a very simple script, and so the clouds are going to move. I have a couple scripts that do that, and then so the whole thing here, I mean, it looks, like I said, I don't really like. It just looks a little too messy, and the color palette's a little off. But this is what it looks like. I also added some text to it that appears. It has its own little script to control when it appears. Like I said, it doesn't look terrible. Some people might say it looks good. I don't think it wasn't good enough for me. I'm kind of going back to the drawing board. I feel like it's a little bit too pixelated. It's a little bit too cutesy. I want it to look a little bit darker. What I think I kind of learned is that graphic scale is great for doing small little sprite animations, but for big things like this, I think graphic scale leaves a little bit to be desired. And so I began redoing it on a new program called Krita. I had never used Krita, but I have been impressed with it so far. So it's totally free. And what I'm trying to decide now is, do I want to do this kind of pixel art look, or do I want to make it have a different style and that's not pixel art? So this is my resized canvas. I made it 4 times bigger, and I started to redo it. My image, and this is as far as I've gotten, so we can toggle all these layers. And so Krita works the same. It just has much better compatibility. So for example, my clouds now look a lot more cloudy because Krita doesn't just have pixel art one pixel at a time kind of drawing things like graphic scale, but you can also do all kinds of crazy paint strokes and whatnot. And so it's still pixel art, but it just has a little bit more detail to it. And so the clouds look pretty cool there. My road, my city, again, color-wise, you know, you can do cool colors in graphic scale, but color control is not as easy. Here you can blend all kinds of colors. And so I wanted some more pinks and blues in my city to give it that really cool cyberpunk feel. So I kind of have this layer underneath these buildings. Oh, these are my fake buildings. I put some refineries, some smog, and then these are the buildings. That's as far as I got. This is my original. You can see this is looking a lot more detailed. It's still in the same spirit of the original. Man, though, the problem with this is, holy shit, does it take a long time. I mean, this took me many, many hours to make already, and I'm about halfway through. And so if I'm being honest, I'm kind of rethinking these cinematics. And I'm thinking that instead of pixel art, first of all, I kind of redrew my city because I just didn't, the city is still looking kind of too nice. Like, some cyberpunk cities kind of look like somewhere that would be cool to live and have a cool style to them, and other cyberpunk cities look really dystopian and hellish, and I kind of like that better, I think. But I think it's not going to really even be pixel art. I think it'll be some other kind of digital art. One game that I really like the animations on, because they're super simple and doable, was Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker. They're just sort of these digital artworks, and occasionally something moves, but a lot of times they're static images that just have kind of like moving layers. And it's very effective still at delivering plot, and it's simple.
Well, that's enough of this drivel travel. Let's find out what we want to know.
That leads us pretty well into our next discussion, which is kind of okay, this is great for plot and cinematics, but what kind of game am I going to make? It's a 2D platformer. No matter what kind of game you make, it's going to take absurd amounts of effort and time and energy. It is wise, anybody who's trying to do this for the first time, to make a game that is on some fundamental level very simple, because if it's super complicated and you're going for a home run on the very first game you ever make, you're likely going to fail. And already I'm feeling like mine is starting to get more complicated than it probably ought to. And so whenever possible, kind of dream small. It's a bad advice. Most people would not give that advice, but I'm trying to dream as small as possible for my first game, because it's very easy to get burned out and turned aside. I've already, I worked for about 2 months on it and was going strong, but then some shit happened in my life and I didn't work on it for like a week because I just didn't really feel like it. And that's going to happen to anybody who's trying to do solo game development. Like, it's really challenging. And so I know a lot of people have really awesome and amazing ideas, and like a 2D platformer is not, it's nothing particularly original about it. It's overplayed genre. If I go on to Steam, there's so many 2D platformers coming out each month. It's oversaturated. It's also kind of an old feel, so a lot of people don't even bother to play 2D platformers, but I'm trying to set my sights rather simple, and if I can make a compelling plot and some game that is fun in a kind of old school retro way, maybe it'll do well. Again, I have a lot of lofty ideas for games I want to make, but I'm not doing those first because I want to learn the process with something I'm actually less passionate about. And that's not to say that you can't, you can be very passionate about a simple idea, but for my game, trying to make it simple, I'm going to try to make the cinematics simple as well, because I need to make a lot of them potentially. And so, speaking of which, besides a 2D platformer, am I just going to make like the most simple of game, like a Mario style, like old school? You just you got one thing you can do. You can move and you can hop, and if you land on something, you can kill it. Is that the kind of game I want to make? I have not played a ton of 2D platformers, and I've definitely, I did some Unity coding over time and made some different animations, but I've never coded a 2D platformer. So the first thing I did as I came back into game making was I watched a pretty long tutorial on a 2D platformer, and it was excellent. I will recommend it to you here, and here it is.
We should drag our player.
This is the one I use. It's by the YouTuber Game Code Library. She is great at breaking down exactly what you need to code and what you need to do in the Unity interface to make it work. She does not explain a lot of the code. Like, she doesn't really go over like what the code means or how it works. And so your hunch might be to just copy her code and not think about it much, and then just kind of copy her code over to yours. I fought that temptation. Every time she wrote a code on the side, I would ask, ChatGPT to kind of explain what the code meant. ChatGPT loves to write code for you and try to write code and figure out what you're talking about. And here's a code. I typically did not just copy and paste ChatGPT's code to try to write code. I don't think it's very good. Usually when I asked it, how would I approach coding this, and it gave me a sample code, that code quite often didn't work very well, or there was a much simpler way to do it than what they did. But what I do like ChatGPT for is to ask questions. Like, you can see, like, I've been asking, I just put this all in one thing so that I can reference it with Control Find. If I forget, oh wait, what was that thing that I was doing a while back, I can do Control Find and I can search a keyword and pull it up, so I don't have to keep asking the same questions over and over again. But my questions at the beginning were very rudimentary. Like, I hadn't really coded in C# in like not really extensively in like 10 years. I remembered the basics when she started going into it, but they were just like, in Unity's code, what does void refer to? Now, that's a very common thing if you're just starting out. Like, there's these little void codes all over the place. What is a float, as a reminder? Again, I was doing very basic things here. That's almost embarrassing. There's some controversy with how AI should be used in coding and in game making and in game art design and all those things. To me, ChatGPT is a tool that can help us do this. It shouldn't be doing it for us, it should be helping us do it. I will tell you, compared to 10 years ago, coding and designing games is so much easier now that we have this tool. Back in the day, this thing has existed for a while, this scripting API, and it will, what's the vector3, and it'll explain what it is, and it'll give you some examples and things like that. This is super helpful for building code, but I can't ask this saying, hey, what does transform, dot position, what does that really mean, or what does it reference? Whereas with ChatGPT, I can ask very specific questions about very specific things, and it can explain what they mean. Overall, that is such an amazing tool. Why would you not use it? So I do not use ChatGPT to write the code. Usually the code it writes sucks ass. I do not use ChatGPT to create my artwork for my game. I want to create it myself. The best video games have a human touch, and already I'm discovering that sometimes you code something and it doesn't work out a way, and it almost creates like a bug, something that was unintentional, but then you end up liking the thing that is created more than what your original idea was. And if you just have ChatGPT do everything, you're not going to get those moments. I look at ChatGPT like, I loved the show Star Trek Next Generation when I was growing up. It was one of my favorites. And they have a computer that is kind of like ChatGPT. It just is this like massive database of knowledge, and it also kind of has its own artificial intelligence that can do things. The crew does not just ask it to fix all of its problems. The crew of the Enterprise uses the computer to help them research and problem solve.
Computer, generate a cross-section image of the dilithium crystal chamber. What about reorienting the crystal?
It is possible to reorient the crystal.
I need to be able to turn that thing inside out. Computer, is there a cross-section image we can replicate on a holodeck?
His brain is much smaller, sir. I do not believe he can comprehend our language.
Perhaps we can find a way to communicate.
Will, can you understand what it is that
But they do not just ask it to do everything. And so that's kind of how I think we need to approach AI in game writing. Something else I would do as I was writing the code that this lady had already written, and she was just kind of typing it up and doing some basic explanations of what she was doing, but not really explaining each part of the code. What I would do was take notes, basically. So as I learned things, I would take notes on how things worked, and then I could go back to those notes if I needed to for an explanation. So I think that's super helpful. After about 3 weeks of kind of coding and taking notes, I decided, okay, I can actually start to figure out how I'm going to make my own game and what sort of game mechanics I wanted to use. I am not super experienced in 2D platformers. It is not a game genre I've played a ton of. Possibly my earliest memory of a video game that I actually gave a shit about and I actually wanted to play was for the Super Nintendo, and it was called The Empire Strikes Back. I love Star Wars. What I liked about this game is that, besides it being Star Wars, was that you had a variety of different environments. You could ride tauntauns, you could use lightsabers, you could use blasters, you could play as different characters. There were a lot of enemies, different kinds of enemies that had different behaviors. It was a 2D platformer, but it had a lot of kind of interesting things going for it that could change up gameplay and make it not get boring, because 2D platformers can get kind of redundant and kind of boring if you don't have these kind of varieties. Oh, and something else I loved about Empire Strikes Back is that it had boss battles within the 2D platformer. Not always the most creative bosses, but bosses nonetheless. The other 2D platformer I played a lot of is Crash Bandicoot. Technically a 3D platformer, but there were some levels that were basically just 2D platformers. What I liked about Crash Bandicoot is a lot of challenge and a lot of variety to the level design. I did love the creativity, the fun of it. It was just a fun game to play. Really like the environmental hazards of Crash Bandicoot. I like that you had to get a lot of precise timing to advance through levels. I might need to play some more modern 2D platformers. I know Cuphead has, I've never played it, but I know it has platforming elements. I also like the idea of boss battles, so Cuphead would probably have a lot of value in that. In terms of just kind of boss behavior and ideas for what makes a challenging boss battle in a 2D environment, especially since I probably will have some gun options in terms of shooting. Another one I know has some platforming elements and is kind of like a 2D fighter game is Hollow Knight, and I think I will probably give that a playthrough. And I believe it also has some boss battles as well. If you have any other game suggestions on 2D platformers I should play before kind of setting out to make my own, please leave them in the comments. I would love to hear them. So yeah, ultimately I want to make a game that has a kind of variety of environments and environmental hazards, a variety of enemies, and a variety of weapons that kind of change how you can approach the play style of each level that you're going through. I do kind of like the idea of having different unique weapons that fundamentally change the game. I've only done one so far, but I have some ideas for other ones. This might be a little controversial, but my favorite games are not just ones that involve skill and strategy, but also games that involve just a bit of luck. I'll give you an example of this. My grandmother taught me to play cards when I was like old enough to talk. She started teaching me how to play poker. I fucking love poker. My dad loves chess. He absolutely loves it. And I would play with him growing up. And my love for poker far exceeds my love for chess. Let me explain. Again, poker maybe borderline has too much luck in it. You can get really unlucky at times, but consistently the best players in the world of poker are always doing really well at tournaments, and so there is clearly not a luck. There's tons of strategy and skill to the game. But yes, at the end of the day, I could beat the best poker player in the world just based on me getting lucky. And there's just something to be said about having that kind of wild card in a game. Whereas chess, I am not beating the best chess player in the world, not in a million years. Chess is pure skill and strategy. I guess the only luck is a player kind of being forgetful or making a mistake, which isn't actually luck at all. That's still just skill. And I think chess would be more fun if there was just some kind of wild card element to it. And so I do want to have some kind of lucky aspect to this game. I'm thinking in terms of kind of weapon drops, that at different points in the game you might have a choice on weapons, but you will not always be able to get the weapon of your choice at any given time. And there will be an element of, man, if you can just get lucky and get the right weapon for this part of the level and another weapon at this part of the level for the boss battle. I would be curious of other aspects of luck that could be incorporated to a 2D platformer. That's really the only one I have so far. I think in any good boss battle, like Elden Ring, for example, there's not a lot of luck in Elden Ring, but sometimes you're fighting a boss and you panic roll, and you end up panic rolling so early that you get to roll again and actually dodge the attack because you suck so bad, and you just get lucky. And so those sorts of elements, I think, could be in this game, and I think those would make the game better.
I'm King Arthur having a banquet.
All right, so yeah, now I just kind of want to go a little progress check. This will probably be the main vlog because I won't have to explain the whole concept of everything again, the whole inspiration for the game and blah, blah, blah. But so far what I've done, I've created a player movement system where my player can move around. I have different platforms. You can jump. There's a critical question here of, should you be able to jump through a platform from beneath? Most platformers have that. I would say, yeah, that's pretty important. So he can do that. I also have part of the movement system is that he can grab onto a wall. So he can grab a wall and you can kind of slide down the wall. And of course, along with this movement system is all the sprite models and the animator. So as he moves around, he's running. When you jump, I have 3 animations: a jump animation, a top animation where he hangs in the air like a little monkey for a second, and then falls, and he has a fall kick. He kind of kicks as he's falling. You have the choice of disabling movement once you jump. So when you jump a direction, are you just committed to that direction or not? That would make the game harder, but I think having some control while you're in the air to kind of control where you're going to land is going to be crucial for actually fighting. So I'm leaving it open that you can control movement while in midair. Beyond that, I also have an attack system, so you can punch and you can kick. And I scripted it so that if you time it correctly, you can kind of do a combo: punch, kick, punch, kick, punch, kick. Whereas if you're just punching one after another, there's a little bit of a delay. You can't just kind of punch as fast as you can punch kick. I wanted to put a little bit of skill in that. So if I'm just punching as fast as I can, you can see there's a little gap in how fast he punches. If I'm just kicking as fast as I can, there's a little gap. But if I punch kick, I can combo it fast. A little bit of skill there. So if you want to output the most damage, punch kick alternation is what you want to do. I also have a rudimentary weapons UI here, an inventory system. So right now you can see that we are unarmed and we're on level 1, so we're not doing any extra unarmed damage. I'm thinking that there might be some pickups and things along the way that could boost certain damage types, and I would have that displayed there. I decided for the inventory slot to have a simple sprite animation. I just think it's kind of cool. I haven't really seen that in a game before. So this has a glowing fist, and it says in Korean. I have my best friend is Korean, and most of the time games have Japanese, and I just thought, I think Koreans are cooler. Ooh, maybe I shouldn't say that. I've been to Korea twice. I love Korea, and so I wanted to have some Korean writing. This Korean writing here says basically that something like "tough guy, badass" is the translation that my friend gave to me. In other words, if you are playing this game without using any weapons, you are a tough guy, badass. And so you can, if you want to make it harder for yourself, you can choose not to pick up any weapons and just fight. I like this grab ability because this platform is too high. With this grab feature, I can grab a wall and jump across. I kind of like that feature. So already I'm getting some kind of interesting dynamics that I can play with. I do have a basic inventory system. I only made one weapon so far. It's a spear. My monk, again, he is a robot monk, and by definition, you know, Buddhists tend to be non-violent, and so he doesn't want to kill his foes, so punching and kicking, non-lethal. And then this spear is kind of an electro riot spear, so when I push the E button, I can pick it up, and you can see that my inventory slot has changed, and it reflects some data that I gave the spear in code. And so now that I have the spear, you can see that all of my sprites have been remodeled to have my character holding the spear. And now that I have the spear, I can still kick, but I can no longer punch. When I use the punch button, now I have a spear stab. The Korean here, by the way, on the image of the riot spear says stabby stabby. And so basically what does the spear do as a weapon compared to unarmed? It gives you more reach. And the other thing, inspired by my favorite platformer of all time, Empire Strikes Back, if you are in the air with a spear, you can do a twirl attack. So if I jump, I can do a twirl attack and kind of hit all the enemies around me. I think that's pretty sweet looking. I love the animation of that sort of arc going behind you. I love that. That's pretty cool. By the way, how I did the spear animation is within your animator in Unity. I had never done this before, and it took me a second to figure out how. Like, okay, my character picks up a spear. I want the spear to be in his hand. How do I animate that? There's two different ways. You can put a layer that is just the image of the spear, and it kind of like goes on top of your other guy. That was too hard for me, and so what I decided is in graphic scale, I just redrew my character. So in graphic scale, I have my character running. I basically also manually drew him running with the spear. So it's the same run animation, but he's just drew the spear into his hand as he's running. There he is. This is not the run animation. I don't know why it's not working, but basically I just redrew him instead of just jumping without the spear. Now I have it in his hand, basically. And so I had to redraw my little guy, well, copy and paste him and then draw a spear on top of him. And so that's how I did all the spear sprites. And so how that switches is when I click the E button, there are layer indexes. One's unarmed and one is speared. Whenever you pick up on a weapon, it runs this little script, anim switch, and basically if right now it's very rudimentary. If the weapon name is spear, it sets the spear animator weight to 1 and the other one to 0, which basically turns one on and turns the other one off. Simple. And so in in Unity here, I have two different layers, one for a whole animator for if your character is holding the spear, and a whole nother one if the character doesn't. It's a lot of work to have a dude pick up a spear, I tell you what, but that is game coding. Alright, so beyond that inventory system, I also have a rudimentary enemy damage system. Let's turn our thug back on and see what he does. This is kind of what he looks like when he's not moving. I don't know, just kind of a generic cyberpunk thug hitchman, and he's kind of carrying some kind of club with electricity on it. I think I asked ChatGPT to make some random thug-looking characters. This guy with a hoodie, I think, was kind of one of those characters, and then I colored him and gave him a little mask and a little club. So my character, but inspired by a generic ChatGPT thug hoodie guy. I like his little animation, his idle animation. So he is actually, if he's there he is, idling, very menacingly. If I begin to come closer to him, he will aggro towards me. So on my character, if I come closer, now he's walking towards me. Let's go to maximum view. Alright, so he has a health bar above him that is green. If I punch him, we can see kind of we can push each other back and forth. It's a little bit awkward, the rigid body system and collider system. I think that's not the worst. But yeah, if I punch him, not only does it do damage and you can see him losing health, but it also shows how much damage I do. If I kick him, it should kind of knock him back a little bit. I'm working on that knockback effect. And then my favorite thing is that if I fall onto him, so let's just jump on him from a low height. Oh, I did it at, I don't know if you saw that, I did 230 damage. If I jump on him from a higher height, it does more damage. So let me see if I can do that. Boom, 412 damage. The maximum is 500 damage. So if you jump off a high platform onto an enemy, you can kill them. And when you kill them, their little guy falls over. Notice he didn't attack me because I haven't scripted that yet or animated it yet. Let's go ahead and turn on our drone. So here's our drone, and he also follows me around, but he can fly, and he can also zap me, and when he zaps me, he kind of retreats afterward. Still basically designing him. Notice that when he zaps me, it doesn't do any damage because I don't have a health system yet. That's also something to come.
Sounds like my rear.
So what's next is for me to develop a player health system. So above where we have the weapon UI, you would have a health bar, and when the enemies attack, I need to create enemy attack animations and also the kind of algorithms that dictate how they attack and their attack patterns. Basically a player health system and an enemy attack system is my next step. And part of that system, I want the player to be able to dodge attacks. I've been playing, the last game I really played a lot of was Elden Ring, and I do kind of like that idea of being able to dodge or roll or something like that, so you can time it and memorize attack patterns. I do like that element of skill to it, and I think that would be very interesting for boss battles as well. So those are my three main things that I'm going to be working on probably this next month. I think that'll take a while, and so I'll probably do another blog after that point to see how that's all looking. And in the semi-near future, I do want to make some environmental sprites and hazards, so that I'm not just staring at this gray world, but rather a world that has a cool cyberpunk. I think my first environment will be kind of the cyberpunk slum environment, which is why we are fighting these thugs. So, did you learn anything from this? Is there any big takeaway? I feel like I've loved video games my whole life, and I love coding. I also love music, and I love creativity, and I love art. And so all these things merge together for game design. But even if you're really talented at all those things, it is so overwhelming, and there's so many things. I'm hoping that this vlog will kind of help me, kind of motivate me to keep going and not give up. There are always errors. There is anything you think. Something I learned doing my PhD is whatever task you think you're doing, multiply the time you think it will take by probably 5, realistically sometimes 10. If you think something's going to take a day, it'll probably take 10 days. And so having those really low expectations, I think, is kind of essential, but also not giving up on your vision and your dream is also a big part of it. All right, well, that's it. This is my first vlog. How should I sign off? How about with just awkward silence?